The strategic choice facing our protagonists is, well, it's terrifyingly stark. Against an enemy who now seems to control the very structure of the Upside Down, do they have to rely on unprecedented raw power, or is the actual path to victory hidden, targeting a psychological Achilles heel?
Exactly. We are analyzing the final confrontation that's been teased by the latest source material. Specifically, the new details about Will's expanding abilities, the necessity of this shock jock experiment, and the inner turmoil we can now clearly see within Henry Creel. I'm going to argue that the overwhelming, possibly world-ending threat demands total commitment to a massive, decisive psychic strike delivered by Will.
And I'll be contending that the most compelling reading of this new evidence points Will almost entirely in the other direction. It's about exploiting Vecna's inherent psychological and dimensional weaknesses. I think that strategic, non-direct methods are going to be far more effective than just trying to match his power.
All right. The evidence we have shows the stakes are higher than they have ever been, and that demands a truly catastrophic response. The latest clip reveals Henry Creel's, his benevolent facade, explicitly telling the captured children that the enemy seeks to destroy more than just the lives of their loved ones. I mean, that elevates the conflict from a regional horror to an existential crisis. The goal can't be mere disruption anymore, it has to be outright destruction. And we have a clear operational precedent for this. We saw Will's devastating power at the end of The Sorcerer. He took out 3 Demogorgons simultaneously with a single massive mental blast, and he did it through the hive mind. Joyce's plan, the one centered around the WSQ radio station, is just the logical, necessary conclusion to this demonstrated capability. The idea is frankly straightforward. Will connects to the hive mind, bypasses all the lesser creatures, and delivers a single, final blow powerful enough to eliminate Vecna. And that level of power is what triggers the collapse of his entire army. Trying to rely on complicated psychological warfare is just too risky when the enemy fully expects them to follow the kids into his mindscape. Only a direct, powerful, decisive strike can work.
I understand the impulse, I really do. That idea of a single, final blow. But I just don't see the evidence supporting that interpretation, especially when the source material keeps giving us these, subtle clues about systemic failures within Vecna himself. Now, Will's power is undeniable, of course, but trying to just match Vecna's output ignores all this vital new evidence, pointing to his inherent instabilities. The key to victory here, I think, lies not in power, but in precision.
But is he really unstable?
I think so. We have concrete proof. We see Henry Creel's facade, this benevolent guide, momentarily glitching. He shifts between that benign figure, the savage lab version of himself, and then the fully corrupted Vecna form. And this is all while he's maneuvering Max and Holly. This isn't just a strategic change of costume. To me, it suggests a real internal struggle, a genuine crack in his psychic foundation that is just waiting to be exploited. And furthermore, the visual foreshadowing is just too specific to ignore. We have repeated references to trauma affecting the brain. You've got the obscured eye motif used for Will, the very deliberate inclusion of the story of Phineas Gage, and the direct mythological link to the Dungeons and Dragons Eye of Vecna artifact. These are not random Easter eggs. They strongly suggest a specific strategic vulnerability tied to Vecna's physical flaw, his missing eye. And Will, given his unique perspective, is the one positioned to discover or exploit that, not just act as a psychic battering ram. The path forward is scalp work, not a sledgehammer.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's step back and look at the shock jock plan. This deliberate, grotesque electrocution of a captured Demogorgon. To me, the complexity of that plan confirms the need for extreme force, not subtle espionage. The Demogorgon is being used as a high-voltage conduit. Joyce's plan is the only one designed for the necessary scale.
I'm not sure I follow that logic.
Well, the experiment is simply the high-risk means to gain a stable, maximum output connection for Will to execute this final blow. Why the electricity? It's a Frankenstein analogy. They are trying to harness a biological system, the Demogorgon's connection to the hive mind, and push it past its natural limit using extreme current. It's about increasing the psychic voltage to make the strike possible against a target as armored as Vecna. It's not about just accessing some passive intelligence feed. If they were just spying, they would use far less destructive and frankly far less risky methods.
See, I'm just not convinced that the extreme risk baked into that setup justifies interpreting it as a mere amplification tool. I mean, why build such a complicated high-risk mechanism just to maximize power? Especially when Will has already demonstrated high output without external power sources. And more than that, if the sole goal was maximizing psychic force, the logical, proven strategy would be to put Will in a sensory deprivation tank, maybe alongside Eleven, a method we know provides stability and high output. They are deliberately not doing that.
So you think it's for something else entirely?
Yes, the Shock Jock plan, with a captured, agitated creature used as a live wire. It feels structurally designed for strategic espionage, for remote tactical access. Why? Because using a Demogorgon as an avatar minimizes human risk. If Will fails, they lose the conduit, not Will himself. The objective is likely to spy on Vecna, to locate and rescue Holly and the other kids, using the Demogorgon's link for intelligence gathering or, subtle targeted disruption. The electricity might be to stabilize the connection for remote viewing or precise psychic manipulation, making it an advanced tactical tool, not a power booster.
That relies on a pretty substantial assumption, though. The assumption that a creature as volatile as a Demogorgon can be effectively controlled for precise intelligence gathering while it's being electrocuted. The trauma is more likely to create a chaotic connection suitable only for an overwhelming burst of destructive energy. You're minimizing the sheer dimensional distance and the resistance they have to overcome. A soft, precise connection is just unlikely to breach Vecna's new armored boundary. This plan is desperate because the power needed exceeds anything they've tried before. The brutality of the method matches the scale of the required force.
But the material explicitly shows us Vecna's entire strategy depends on psychological entrapment. He draws his victims in. The Demogorgon is part of that network, a living piece of Vecna's surveillance. Exploiting that connection offers a unique angle, strategic insertion. They're turning his own network against him. To me, the Shock Jock experiment is about remote entry and the ability to maneuver within the hive mind consciousness without Will's physical body being vulnerable. That's the definition of tactical calculation, not brute force.
Okay, let's address this idea that Vecna's instability is an exploitable weakness. I'm going to argue that the glitching of Henry Creel, it's not a sign of vulnerability. It's a demonstration of his terrifying ability to cycle through identities, the Facade, the savage Henry, the corrupted Vecna, before deliberately choosing his most destructive form. This cycling is a preparation, not a breakdown.
A preparation for what?
We see the transformation happen in real time. His hand corrupts into Vecna's form as he's chasing Max and Holly. This signals that he's actively hardening himself, pushing past the last vestiges of Henry Creel and preparing to achieve full unified strength. A temporary psychological crack is an irrelevant gambit against a monster who manipulates dimensional reality and is actively shedding his human constraints. To attack a passing moment of self-doubt while he is transforming into a higher dimensional entity is a fatal strategic mistake. He's leveraging his past trauma to generate power, not suffering from it.
I would frame that completely differently. The fact that Max and Holly are successfully maneuvering inside his mindscape and causing him to glitch suggests their psychological warfare is actively working. It's destabilizing him. Vecna needs that benevolent facade to lure the children. The moment that facade cracks, it proves the manipulation is exerting a genuine strain on his consciousness.
A strain, maybe, but not a critical failure.
But the whole premise of their plan is to erode his will. Holly is actively pretending to trust the Henry Creel persona, forcing him to maintain a contradictory psychological state. Vecna expects physical resistance, he expects psychic duels, he's armored for that. But he is focused on trapping them, not anticipating a strategic attack from inside his own consciousness that exploits his guilt and regret. That struggle is the vestige of Henry that must be targeted. If he had fully consolidated his power, that instability wouldn't be visible at all. The glitching confirms the weak point is active and exploitable right now.
But what does exploitation even look like in practice? Does Max just badger him into non-existence? The source material shows that every time he is mentally assaulted or reminded of his past, he responds with more destructive power. He consolidates his rage. Look at what happened when Eleven challenged him in the void. He didn't crumble, he got stronger. Max and Holly are maneuvering, yes, but they're bait. Vecna is allowing them to move to draw in the larger strategic target, Will or Eleven. Focusing on the sad memory of Henry Creel is a tactical dead end.
Well, the vulnerability doesn't have to be a memory. It could be a structural flaw. And this brings us back to that constant visual motif. Phineas Gage, a man whose brain injury fundamentally altered his personality. That visual parallel tied to Vecna's missing eye suggests a precise physical, psychological vulnerability that acts as a keyhole which Will is uniquely positioned to see or create. You don't defeat him by overwhelming the armor, you defeat him by finding the one spot the armor doesn't cover. And that's the only way to stop the transformation before it's complete.
And we can't ignore the scale of what's coming. Even if Vecna has a minor psychological flaw, the final antagonist might transcend Vecna altogether. The visuals suggest a colossal, almost divine threat. We're seeing a massive energy sphere, a mind flare structure, hovering over Hawkins' lab. There are strong suggestions of an even greater dimensional entity. Call it Tiamat or Thessaliera, hatching or awakening.
Sure, the scale is massive.
Right, and the sheer scale of reality tearing apart means that localized, sophisticated strategy becomes moot. The hive mind particles are visibly traveling through the radio tower, the dimensional barrier is fracturing. Against a creature of that magnitude, a cosmic horror, we are beyond psychological warfare. Only a catastrophic, clean release of power, like Will's final psychic blow, can address a crisis at this dimensional magnitude. Relying on exploiting Henry Creel's human trauma against a creature of that scope is simply insufficient.
I see why you think that, and I agree the threat appears cosmic. But let me give you a different perspective, one that's rooted firmly in the narrative logic the show has always used, which is D&D. In that mythology, the emergence of a supreme threat like a dragon always comes with an associated artifact or a specific, often very localized vulnerability. Dragons are defeated by finding their hoard or removing one specific scale.
Okay.
This is precisely why the repetition of Will's obscured eye and Vecna's missing eye is so central. It is not accidental, it's a narrative roadmap. The Eye of Vecna lore explicitly states that immense power is gained by losing an eye, but that artifact is also the key to defeating him. You target the structural flaw where the power entered. This means the key to victory is not maximum raw output, but a specific surgical action against Vecna's primary flaw. You use the intelligence gathered through the strategic espionage plan to locate and exploit the weakness suggested by the visual language. The two arguments fold into one unified, targeted attack.
But who delivers that surgical strike? Will's ability is channeling power, not necessarily precise physical manipulation. If this flaw, this Eye of Vecna, is a physical or spiritual key, that still requires someone on the ground to interact with it, which exposes them to Vecna's overwhelming defense systems. If Will delivers the final power strike, he acts as the ultimate shield for that ground team. My position addresses both the scale of the threat and the weakness of the target simultaneously, through brute force channeled into the hive mind.
My interpretation suggests Will's role isn't channeling force, but channeling information and targeting. If Will, through the Demogorgon link, can peer into Vecna's mental plane and identify that specific structural weakness, the point of entry or the psychological core related to his trauma, he may not need to deliver a destructive blow at all. He may just need to expose or destabilize that nexus point, allowing the rest of the team to exploit a real-world vulnerability simultaneously. The key is coordinating the strategic insight, not winning a power duel that, let's be honest, they're almost certainly designed to lose.
We must not mistake internal instability for a reliable tactical opportunity. Given the existential scale of the danger, Vecna's clear trajectory toward full transformation, and the confirmed emergence of a greater dimensional structure, the group just cannot afford to rely on psychological gambits. Will's unique, demonstrated ability to channel massive force through the hive mind is the only credible path to a decisive final outcome. The only way to ensure the end of this nightmare is a powerful final act.
And conversely, I think the evidence points away from a straightforward power-on-power battle. Vecna's need to maintain a facade, the strategic espionage inherent in the De Morgan experiment, and the constant visual emphasis on Henry's specific physical vulnerabilities. It all suggests that the path to victory lies in calculated strategy. They had to exploit the specific psychological and physical cracks in his foundation, using precision to avoid a suicidal power match that Vecna is already scaled up to counter.
What is clear is that the source material intentionally provides credible support for both. For extreme power, the necessity of a heroic sacrifice, and for sophisticated strategy, the feasibility of a surgical strike.
Right. Which ensures that even as the group pluck their final move, the true nature of their enemy and the necessary path to his defeat remains dangerously complex. It demands that they use absolutely all their resources, strategic and psychic, if they have any hope of surviving.
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe and hit the bell to the latest update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end and see you in the next video.